They said I was too old to travel. I showed them what I could do. My name is Margaret. I am 72 years old. I have 3 grown children, several grandchildren, and more wrinkles than I can count. And yet, sometimes I feel like the world decided I was finished long before I ever agreed to stop living. For years, I existed quietly in the background of other people's lives. I helped, I cooked, I listened, I waited. I waited for holidays, for phone calls, for visits that sometimes never came. I waited for permission to still feel alive. And slowly, I began to believe that my time had passed, that adventure belonged to younger people, that dreams expire like old milk in the refrigerator. But this is the story of how I learned that age does not close doors, fear does. And one day I simply decided that I had been afraid long enough. When I was a much younger woman, my husband and I had a dream that we treated like a delicate secret. We wanted to see the ocean together. Not a lake, not a river, but the wide, endless ocean that seemed to stretch into forever. We saw the pictures in travel magazines we could not afford, and we told each other, one day when the children are older, one day when the bills are smaller, one day when life finally becomes easier. But life rarely becomes easier. It simply becomes different. The children came, then the bills, then illnesses, then responsibilities. There was always something more urgent than our dream, a doctor visit, a broken car, a school fee, and we always promised ourselves that the ocean could wait. Until one day, my husband wasn't there anymore, and the ocean was still waiting, and the promise sat inside my heart like a letter that had never been mailed. Years went by slowly at first, then suddenly. Isn't that strange? The days can feel endless, but the years disappear in a blink. My world became small, very small. A grocery store, a doctor's office, the church pew on Sunday mornings, a cup of tea in the afternoon at my kitchen table, always in the same seat, always with the same view from the window. I tried to convince myself that this was enough, that routine meant comfort, that stillness meant peace. But somewhere inside me, a quiet voice kept whispering, "Is this really all that's left?" One afternoon, I was sitting at that same kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm tea, and my old laptop was open in front of me, and an advertisement appeared on the screen as if it had been waiting for me to finally notice. It said, "Senior travel packages, because it's never too late." I stared at the words for a long time. Never too late. They echoed inside me. I whispered the words out loud, testing them like a new pair of shoes. Never too late. And then something inside me said one single word. Go. It wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It was more like a steady heartbeat. Go. Go before you talk yourself out of it. Go before you forget that you once wanted more than this small, careful life. Go before regret becomes the heaviest thing you carry. For a week, I walked around my house whispering that word inside my mind. Go. And finally, I did something bold. I told my children. I expected them to smile. I truly did. I thought they would say, "Mom, that's wonderful. You deserve this. We are proud of you for still wanting to live fully." But instead, my eldest son frowned. "Travel at your age? Mom, be serious. You could fall. You could get lost. You could get sick." My daughter sighed and shook her head. "This isn't safe. What if something happens and we're not there? Do you really want to go alone?" And my youngest son didn't say very much at all, but the way he looked at me said everything. It was the look you give to fragile glass, as if one wrong step might shatter me completely. They saw risk, I saw life. But their voices followed me everywhere. You're too old. It isn't safe. You should just stay home. And the worst part, for a while I almost believed them. Almost. One quiet night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun had gone down. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, the house was full of silence, and I realized that if I did not choose to live now, I might never choose it again. So I opened my laptop and I booked the ticket. One seat, one suitcase, one 72-year-old woman who had finally decided that regret weighed far more than fear. When the day of the journey arrived, my hands trembled at the airport, not because of the airplane I had flown before. No, they trembled because for the first time in many years I was truly alone with my own choices. No husband to lean on, no children to guide me, just me and the metal armrest of the waiting room chair. But then something lovely happened. A little girl walked past holding her mother's hand. She looked up at me with bright, curious eyes and smiled. Not a pity smile, a genuine, innocent one, the kind that says the world is still kind if you're willing to see it. I smiled back, and suddenly I didn't feel quite so invisible anymore. During the flight, I sat by the window and watched the clouds pass beneath us like mountains made of light, and for a moment I felt young again, not in body, but in spirit. When I finally arrived and saw the ocean for the first time in my life, the world went quiet, completely quiet. The waves moved in and out with a rhythm older than time itself. The ocean stretched into forever, and something inside me softened. I cried, not loud, noisy tears, but soft ones, the kind that wash the dust off your soul. I whispered, "This is for us," to the memory of my husband, and though he wasn't standing beside me, I felt him there in the wind and the waves. That evening I went to a small seaside cafe. I ordered tea and watched the sky turn gold and pink, and that is where I met Elena. She was a woman around my age with silver hair tied back and a red scarf around her neck. She smiled kindly at me and asked, "Traveling alone?" I said, "Yes," softly. "Are you?" "So am I," she replied, and just like that, two strangers became friends. We talked for hours about life, love, regret, laughter, mistakes, and children who sometimes forget that their parents once had dreams too. She had also lost her husband, and for the first time in a long while, I did not feel alone in the way that hurts. On the fourth day of my trip, something frightening happened. I slipped slightly on a wet stone near the pier. I did not fall, but my heart raced. And just like that, my children's voices filled my head again. "See? Too risky, too dangerous, too old." Fear grabbed me by the shoulders. I sat down on a nearby bench, breathing slowly with tears stinging my eyes. And then my phone buzzed. It was my daughter. "Mom, we still think this trip is a bad idea. Please come home early." For a moment, I almost gave in. But then something inside me shifted. I realized something powerful, something I wish I had understood sooner. Falling once does not make life dangerous. Stopping life because you might fall, that is what truly makes life small. So I took a deep breath, I stood up, and I kept walking. Every day after that, I began writing in a little notebook I had bought at a souvenir shop. I wrote about the color of the sky at dusk, the music of the waves, the kindness of strangers. I wrote about courage, not the loud type, but the quiet kind that whispers, "Keep going." I wrote letters to my younger self. I told her I was proud of her for surviving. I told her I was sorry it took so long to live for herself again. And then I forgave my children because fear is contagious and they had simply caught it before I did. When my trip finally ended and I flew back home, my children were waiting for me. They expected a fragile, exhausted woman. Instead, they saw someone with light in their eyes again. My daughter began to cry.
"Mom, we were just scared." I hugged her gently and said, "I know, but I am still here." And I meant it, not just physically, but fully, wholly, completely alive. So if you are listening to my story right now, wherever you are, however old you may be, please remember this. Age does not close doors. We do, and we also hold the key to open them again. So go, travel if you want to travel, learn if you want to learn, begin again if your heart still beats with curiosity. Because the world is still here, and so are you, and that is enough.